Hi, and welcome to the Rare Business Podcast. My name is Adrian Swinsko, and I'm a consultant, advisor, researcher, and writer on all things related to customer service and customer experience. Through this podcast, I seek out and interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, business and tech leaders, and leading thinkers about what it takes to build organizations that produce better outcomes for both customers and employees in this fast-moving modern age that we live in. If this is your first time listening to one of these interviews, then welcome, and please do dive into the archives at adrianswinsco.com, as I've now completed over 250 of these interviews in the last few years. If this is not your first time listening, then thank you for returning, and I'll aim to do a good enough job to keep you coming back week after week. Anyway, that's enough from me right now. Let's get into the interview. So, welcome to the next edition of the Rare Business Podcast. With me today, I have Todd Olson, who is CEO and co-founder at Pendo. Hey, Todd, how are you doing?
Very well, Adrian. How are you doing?
I am splendid, sir. I'm splendid. Now, Todd, for the benefit of our listeners and readers, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and also the work that you do?
Absolutely. So I lead a technology company, a software as a service company called Pendo. And Pendo is in the business of helping companies create better product experiences. And we do that through two primary ways. One, we embed ourselves within software applications and capture user behavior. And we do that with the mindset of delivering insights back to product teams to help them understand where customers are, what they're doing, and frankly, where they're getting stuck within their software applications. And then we complement that with the ability to communicate with users in apps. So, for example, if a user is confused or wants to be educated or shown how to get value out of a certain application, we provide capabilities to onboard and educate and really guide people to outcomes within software.
Perfect. Now, I know that, so we all know that software abounds these days, and everything is kind of, it's hyper competitive. But there is this tendency when people are building software, whether it's platforms or applications, that they think that more is more and bigger is better. More features means kind of like more tools and more leverage, and therefore kind of happy customers or happy end users. But I'm thinking that you might actually have a different take on this, right?
Absolutely, and I think this is what has in many ways given software a bad name. When you think about people who like, ooh, I'm scared of this application, or I hate my job because I have to use this really horrible piece of software. It's due to enterprise software, which I think the traditional mindset in enterprise software was, if a large customer asked for something and was willing to pay me for it, then I should just add it to the software, independent of what it does for every other customer or every other user of software. So we saw for a while that as enterprise software companies grew, that their software became unusable.
Right.
And ultimately, that creates backlash later in the company's history, and then all of those companies become susceptible to disruption. And we've seen this throughout time, where some new upstart comes up later that creates a simpler, better, easier version of the incumbents, and they fundamentally disrupt that market. And they're doing it with fewer features, honestly.
Sure.
They're doing it with abilities, but yet it's considered more valuable because customers can actually use it.
Yeah, because it seems to me that because what you're talking about a lot of organizational sort of dynamics kind of there, and almost a bit like you're talking about simpler, better, kind of easier. But it still seems to me that many like software is still, I guess, purchased, largely based on price. But given that what we kind of understand, and given I guess what the area that you're in around sort of user experience, particularly employee experience, why is that becoming a growing dimension in procurement decisions? And if not, why not?
I see competing philosophies here, and it depends on the company. I think I'll maybe adjust your statement there, where I think software purchases are made based on value, which value,
okay,
which factor of value, right? And now the challenge is that companies, in order to justify higher prices, aka more value, they will say, well, this software does all of these other things, right? So they'll use features as a proxy for value. But I think that is very much an old school way of doing it. I mean, at the end of the day, software, I think pretty much all software is around automating something that's, generally speaking, been manual.
Right.
And outcome. So I think, I know that we've shifted, and I think other companies have shifted to how do we justify the business outcome independent of the features itself. Like if we make you more productive, if we reduce time doing this, we could have one feature versus 1,000, and it's really about the time reduction, it's about the efficiency. And you're not going to get that efficiency if people don't use your software.
Right.
And we are seeing procurement cycles, and actually in particular in renewal cycles, where procurement teams come back and they take an audit of how much usage a company has had of a given software application. And if it's under what they procured or thought it would be, they use it as a negotiating lever. Like, hey, we bought this thing thinking everyone's going to use it. Only a third of our company uses it. We need a better deal. So that's something that we're seeing more and more. And because we have this renewal cycle, and that's all due to the subscription economy, because we have a subscription economy, like there's the initial sale, but if you can't renew at the same rate, downsells are really, really bad. I think there's more incentive to kind of undersell that first deal and then over time gradually earn more value. And you earn more value by automating more, by simplifying more, by things like that.
It seems to me you're talking about so not price, and I get that, but you're talking about value. But it seems to be also one of the challenges might be that value is also seen very subjectively from different people, different perspectives around the organization. And is that therefore the challenge is that we have got to almost like take on what is this thing called value, particularly if different people are viewing it in different ways.
100%, right? So Pendo, just fun fact, is Latin for the word value. So I'm really, really passionate about it. And that was why we picked the name. But you need to create a shared understanding of value across the company. And you need to understand that, say, the person who's buying the software may measure value differently than the person, say, using the software.
Yes.
And I think there's different formulas for how they get it. But I think what I see companies doing more and more now is those buyers, those procurement people, are actually talking more and more to the end users. And they're using the end users as a proxy for, is my company getting value out of it? So whereas traditionally software companies, really anyone in the software space, seem to be ignoring the user, you just can't ignore the user anymore.
Yeah.
And I think when I started my career, in B2B software, I think, that we would always say in the product management or product marketing world, it's like, make sure you know that the buyer is more important than the user because the buyer signs checks. That's not the case today.
Yes.
The buyer still signs checks, but the users are telling the buyers, hey, we can't stand this thing. Please pick something else. Or because of the number of the proliferation of software as a service apps, they can go sign up on the internet. They throw their credit card in. It doesn't even hit an expense level, right? It's like $19 a month, $29 a month. And then all of a sudden, these rogue applications come in because they get tired of using the other things.
Sure.
And that's a common pattern we see as well. That the barrier to adoption has become so low that people just go do it.
Yeah.
Right? And then you have these IT teams, looking around, trying to, collapse all these things. But I think that's been one of the more interesting trends as well.
And so could I be so bold to say that tell me what you think about this statement. It's something I wrote down just now. I said, your procurement team is having could potentially have both a positive and or a negative impact on both your CX and therefore your EX and therefore your CX. So your product teams your procurement team rather is in the mix and having a direct impact of both your EX and therefore your CX.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah. I mean, and I think, I love you touching on that. One of my favorite Simon Sinek quotes talks about, how happy and engaged, I have to paraphrase it now, but it's around, companies, when your employees love your company, it's easier to deliver great products to customers. And I can look it up and send it, but I think I love that. And I think it speaks so much to the state of affairs today. Like if you're going in and you're being forced to use some software that's just as painful, you're is engaged. You're not going to help your customers better. I'll never forget when I started Pendo early days. I had to go in and, for example, buy a mattress, and went in there, and the sales rep literally couldn't use the software and sell it to me.
Right.
She just couldn't. Talking about the ultimate fail and customer experience. The point of sale solution was too complicated to sell me something. And that's obviously very direct, but there's a lot of indirect use cases like that where, people, lead to bad customer experiences.
Sure. I guess what we also should point out is that, the idea that what you're doing is actually trying to improve the user of the product experience. That doesn't mean to say that not all software is necessarily kind of bad. It could be that actually you may be pointing out a challenge or a problem with both just user knowledge and or training or support that they've been given as well. Correct.
Onboarding and onboarding is an incredibly loaded word, but it's one that we spend a lot of time talking about it, and it runs the gamut from what we call employee onboarding. So a new employee comes on, they get trained up, to software onboarding, which is they start using a new software application. How do they use it? And the two are interlinked, because if you're being forced to use a piece of software for your job, then part of employee onboarding is how to use the software. But the other big piece of it is very often companies customize the software. So their implementation is not like some other implementation. So even if a common example, Salesforce.com is pervasive in sales organizations. But just because you use it, you may know how to use some of the basics, but every company's implementations could be really different, right?
Yeah.
So you need to make sure you're onboarding folks with not just this is the software using, this is our implementation. And then we all have to be cognizant of the fact that, look, we take a new job, we sign a bunch of paperwork that first week, we spend a week in training or 2 weeks in training. A month from now, we're not going to remember what happened that week. Right. So the things that we talk about a lot is how do we do reinforcement? How do we do contextual reinforcement? If I learned something a month ago and then I'm actually putting it to practice a month later, and oh shoot, what was that again? You want it there at your fingertips. Oh yeah. You want this reinforcement of this is how you do it to kind of help you actually and really, really get the knowledge sticky, right?
Yeah. No, that's fair. I guess, so do you have an idea, because this seems to be, I think it's something that we're all probably quite familiar with, is, you start working with a new organization and you'll get a new job and there's a new piece of software and there's a, I feel like a learning curve that we go up with. Some people go at different kind of rates. And so, but do you have an idea of what that might actually be costing firms, an average firm, in terms of efficiency and productivity? Just almost a bit as a way of sort of getting our arms around the problem that you really are addressing.
Oh, geez. I think people can, it's a wild guess, but 20-30% productivity loss at least, just getting people up and running and trying to be effective. I think in the sales side, it can be even higher.
Right.
If you're familiar with how sales works. In sales teams, you have this notion of a ramp.
Uh-huh.
And the ramp time significantly affects the profitability of sales teams. And if you have slower ramps due to tooling, like technology, it's going to have a huge impact. And you're going to see revenue losses because of it as well.
Of course. So I'll pick a slightly easier question this time, Todd. So tell me, how does that actually work in practice? I mean, does the software just sit like a skin across an application and then just records activity and then sort of aggregates that up across the users and things, or how does it work?
Skin's not a bad, not a horrible metaphor. It's inside the software. Think of it as just part of it. Okay. And so it's inside the system tracking things. We don't want the end users to know that all this is occurring. But then there's also some contextual cues. So there's usually some sort of place in the app, some widget, some area where they can get help if they're confused. Again, reinforcement. And there's the ability to have tooltips and other engagement in the app to kind of, if they get stuck, they have a helping hand there that they can quickly get unstuck and without having to go talk to a bunch of people or take themselves out of the flow. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with this great concept of being in the flow. Yeah. Right. And it's some Polish psychologist whose name starts with an M that's far too long for me to memorize. But when you're in the flow, you're way more productive. Now, if you have to stand up or get up or context switch or call someone or Slack someone, you will get out of the flow, right? Yes. Because you're being blocked on answer. Whereas if you can self-serve, if you can get information at your fingertips, you're much more likely to stay in the flow and be productive.
Awesome. Okay. So I tell you what, Todd, maybe to make this kind of even more real, I mean, do you have a couple of examples of, say, companies that you've worked with and you've helped with their, worked with them around their improving their user experience or the software that they use, and what sort of impact that's had on their overall sort of organization, business performance, etc.? Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, one that just sticks in my mind, and there's actually lots, but I have to make sure I think of one that I have permission to talk about publicly. But the one that I am familiar with is a company called Henry Schein. We've been working with this company for a long time, Fortune 500 company, make everything from, they're in the dental industry, but they make everything from dental supplies to dental software to help manage practices. And, I think when we started working with them, we spent a lot of time helping analyze customer and user sentiment in their applications. So we started doing some baselines, things like Net Promoter Score. And, Net Promoter Score is, it's actually very controversial. Wall Street Journal said a controversial article around it. Sure. But you know what? It's simple. Yeah. It's easy to ask. It's easy to answer. I can sit here and we can debate the mathematical efficacy of the number and, what we think statistically and blah, blah, blah. But, if a bunch of people say they wouldn't recommend you, it's probably not a good thing. A bunch of people say they would, probably a better thing, right? So we started working with them and using NPS just as a, basic proxy for customer sentiment. And we discovered areas for improvement. Right. And a lot of those areas for improvement were just basic education. Right. And what was interesting is, wasn't what we see in software too, and you asked about this a little, we talked a little bit earlier, is like every user of software is a little different. And think of a dental practices, there's front desk people, there's hygienists, there's actual dentists themselves, and they identified pockets of challenges for one role. I believe it was the hygienist specifically. Right. And we were kidding them how to use certain core features that they simply weren't as familiar with, or they may have been taught a while ago, but forgot or something to that effect. And then they saw an improvement in NPS score after working to help educate and teach them how to get more value. So that's a very basic example, but pretty impactful. So you can get direct improvements in sentiment just by focusing on education and teaching people what's there.
And so that's an improvement in NPS from their customers rather than just from like an eNPS from their employees.
Yeah, that was from the customers, but of course it ultimately affects the dental offices themselves. I mean, again, if you being forced to use something and it's tough, then it's always good when the vendor makes changes and improves it. It should improve not only the NPS for the product, but then the eNPS for the dental practices.
Yeah. So let me kind of just go back to this kind of almost as the core challenge. I mean, it seems to me that I come across, like you're talking about, you're trying to tackle this, but we're still coming across time and time again that we have either bad products or bad, or we have products or we software that just have a gritty sort of experience. I mean, how are companies still getting away with that? Is that all to do with just embedded sort of legacy players, or is it? Do you actually kind of see that there's this big shift in the market that people that actually the B2B market or inside organization market is starting to sort of catch up with the consumer market, I guess, in terms of user experience?
Yeah. I mean, I think so there's a couple ways that I can answer your question. One, the first question is how are they getting away with it? And your second question, is there a trend? So I guess maybe I'll answer the second question first. There absolutely is a trend.
Right.
And we're seeing disruption. And fewer companies can get away with it than they used to be able to get away with it. But the reality is software is still pretty darn new.
Yes.
I mean, that's I mean, if I think about my career, I started programming in the late 80s. Things were green screens back then. There was no internet, no World Wide Web. The first, web-based applications started coming online in the 90s. They're just not that old, and they have a large head start, and they automate, honestly, complicated things.
Yes.
I was talking to a company the other day, and it's like they do compliance for large-scale manufacturing. Well, how many, young people today want to create an easier, faster version of compliance for large-scale manufacturing? Well, it turns out not a ton right now because they haven't lived that pain. Now, as more and more entrepreneurs live these pains, they say, wow, that software was painful. You're going to see more and more disruption, but I think it's just so early, and it is a factor that they automate, B2B software automates complex things. It's complex, but that's kind of where I see it. I think the disruption's been happening in what I would say the easier things, customer support and maybe sales process and things like that. But you eventually see it affect everything.
Yeah, no, I think it's fascinating because I actually was talking to somebody the other day who was working on this project, and she was telling me that she was like, with a look of horror on her face, she was saying, they've still got a system, like a mainframe system in their business that runs on DOS to do a whole bunch of things. And it's like a core application, but the thing is, it's simple, it's quick, and it's robust, and therefore there's no real incentive right now, just because it chugs away in the background, to change it. But I looked at it, and I looked at her, and I was thinking, oh my God, something that's running on still a mainframe system that's still running on DOS, doing a core business application. But you're absolutely right. Sometimes we think that I guess there is that old rule: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Yet, I guess.
Yes, but in 5 years, can they hire someone to maintain and use it? Probably not.
Well, indeed. Then it becomes increasingly business critical, right?
Yeah. And those people retire. The people that have been maintaining are starting to retire, I mean, maybe it's, not lucky that some people are just bad at preparing for retirement. I think people are retiring later in life. So maybe it's helping companies, but I think they're going to see a shocker when people start leaving, and no one learns their skills anymore.
Sure,
you just don't. right? So it's going to be a challenge.
So if I said, okay, let's kind of raise ourselves up a little bit and say, if somebody was listening to this or reading the highlights and they were thinking about their end, user customer experience, but also kind of the experience that their employees go through, particularly in terms of the experience they have with the software and the tools that they use in their business, and they want to start to think about how do they make it kind of better. I mean, what would be the first thing that you would advise them to do? What would be the best piece of advice you would give them if they're going, I need to start on that journey in terms of, if I improve my employee experience, I improve their and therefore I have to improve their software experience, that will help improve my customer experience. Where should they start, Todd?
I think it's, one, look at the applications that are truly business critical for what you need to run your business, and look at modern tools, and don't be changing, and then survey your users and your employees for what they like and dislike. What's painful, and listen to them.
Yeah.
I think be unafraid of change. I think you find so many companies that want to do things because of like security and some conservatism around those things. And you can get, security is becoming table stakes features. Like nearly every application now has, things like SOC 2 compliance and GDPR compliance, and you can't do business without it. So I think don't be afraid. I think fear is often what's holding a lot of these companies back from doing it. And then I would say focus on not just education but reinforcement.
Okay.
Continually educate. So.
And one thing I also going to notice, actually, as we were putting this interview together, is that I know that you've just acquired a UK-based product analytics company called Receptive, which you are based in Sheffield, I believe.
Right, they are.
Which is great because we love things from up north. Because I used to live in Yorkshire, although I'm originally from Scotland, so we like things from up north. How do they fit into the overall mix? Is that more of a footprint development thing, or is it kind of actually to do the development of the whole product suite? How does it all fit?
Yeah, so a couple things drove that acquisition. Yeah, we're very excited to be up north there in the UK. It's an absolutely beautiful city. So, two things. So one, the company had a core capability that was missing from our stack, and that was while our products have really good insights and how people are using the software, didn't have any insights on what people desired, what they wanted. Essentially their requests or their complaints, just so qualitative feedback. So Receptive has a really great application for managing customer feedback at scale.
Oh, okay.
So if you have hundreds of users, hundreds of customers, how do you sift through and understand what people want? And this can be used either for vendors trying to get a sense for what their users want, but ultimately we see the opportunity for, again, those procurement people or people that are rolling out applications internally, using it for what their internal stakeholders want.
Right.
Again, I talked about how all of these enterprise applications are heavily customized, so they're their own beast, and so this application will be used to help manage requests for that. Like, we want this change, or we want that change, and I think that's vital data to feed back to those teams managing those applications or building those applications.
Perfect. Well, that's exciting news, and well, good luck with that. So, a couple of final things, Todd. Anything else that we've missed out that you'd like to add about this whole sort of space? Because I don't think it actually gets a lot of attention. The whole, user experience, user software experience, and how it impacts the overall employee experience and therefore kind of customer experience. But anything else that you'd like to kind of throw into the ring before I ask you just one fun question at the end?
No, I think that was good. I'm enjoying it.
Cool.
I thought it sounded pretty good.
So here's the thing. So I have just published a new book called Punk CX, and I sort of explained to you a little bit about what that was all about. And what I've started to do at the ends of these podcast interviews is to ask people a couple of questions just to get their take on it. And the first one that I've been asking people is, what one word do they think would describe a punk approach to CX?
Unconventional.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. See, this is going to be an organic word cloud that we're going to develop over the coming months, which is brilliant. And then the second one is, what company or brand do you think would epitomizes a punk CX ethos?
Oh, geez. I think the Virgin brands.
Okay.
Like Richard Branson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. I mean, because there's no the thing with these things is that there's no right and no wrong answers. What I'm trying to do is to get people to think about things that are, like you say, are unconventional, and which are the standout brands, because actually it might broaden our horizons about what we think is different and innovative and worth following and emulating in many ways. But it also just to start a conversation. But Todd, thank you for that. That's been really helpful, and also thank you for the insights into what you're doing at Pendo around, particularly around users' experience with software and how that impacts our broader performance. That's been really great, and thanks for sharing your time and your insight with us today.
My pleasure, Adrian. I really enjoyed it, and look forward to hopefully meeting up one of these days in the UK. Enjoy it.
Well, that's it for another interview. I really hope you enjoyed it. Now, every time I complete one of these interviews, I learn something new, and I try and incorporate that new learning into my writing, my speaking, my workshops, and the consulting that I do for my clients. If you're interested, you can find out more about how I work with clients over at adrianswimsko.com. But one final thing before I go, please consider heading over to iTunes or whichever podcast platform you choose to use, and do leave a review. Every little helps, as they say. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for listening, and do listen in again. All the very best.